Hello and welcome to another SvelteKit tutorial, and this time I want to show you how you can build a small combo box, select list, pop-up LOV, however you want to call it, component like this. So you have a value and you can click here and get a little pop-up that shows values of the database, and you can go ahead and search in there so it doesn't show all the values all the time. And it's basically reusable, so I can here select my values if I have a lot of data in the database and don't have the default select list where you can't search. So if you want to learn how I did this, make sure to check out the video and notice this is more like an informational video on how you can achieve something like this on your own. If you're just interested in the result, look at my code, but this is more a SvelteKit experimentation. It's not like the perfect component that fits all your needs. This is just me figuring out how this can be achieved. So yeah, have fun and enjoy the video. So we want to start creating our component, our combo box select list component, and we start off with the simple number input, and we want that pop-up effect so that we click in here, something pops up where we then can select our value. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I recommend using headless UI. There's also a Svelte version for it. And what it allows us to do is we can use popover stuff. So this library headless UI provides some basic functionalities in components that are pretty unopinionated and unstyled. So radio groups, switches, tabs, disclosures, dialogues, and also this popover, which is essentially what we need. We click onto something, a button for example, and we get this section opened out of nowhere that's floating above the content. And yeah, so let's start using it. And you have to install this library, this headless UI library. Where is it? Here, Grossio Svelte headless. And let's start off with building the component. So what I'm gonna do is go to my lib folder. So this is the place to put shared stuff. You have also the server folder for stuff that only sits on the server, but we're gonna do a front-end component. So let's create one here. We call it Popup Combobox.svelte. And in here, let's start with a script. I want TypeScript lang equals ts. And yeah, what we want to do is we want a label. So like it's currently with a label here and then the input. We want to do the same style. So let's do a label, and label equals, let's default something, and we can also do a heading, for example. When the pop-up opens, we want a heading in there. Select a value. So I'm gonna start with the markup. I'm gonna create a simple div, and in there we can start with a label, and we can put the label text in here. And let's implement the component into our app. So we go to routes, this is on tracks, new page, and here instead of using this add line comment, we can then import our own component. So Popup Combobox, and let's say label album. And okay, so we get our label, great. And the next step is to do the the pop-up that opens, or the popover. So I'm going to import something from this library I showed you before. And we start by just a generic popover class. This just wraps everything, popover. And in there we can do a popover button. And we can say open, and we get our popover panel. That's the content that's opened. And in there we can put, for now, something. If we go back, this should already work. We press open and it's opened. Note that as it is now, it's not really floating, so it's not above the content because we haven't added any styles. As I told you, this headless UI library is unstyled, so you have to style it yourself, and we can do that simply with CSS, but I'm gonna use Tailwind CSS for that because I like it. So first we go to the popover and we must say that it's a relative position. So we say for Tailwind we can just put relative as a class name, and we go to the popover panel and we can say it's absolute, so position is absolute, and we say Z10, so we put the Z index in front of the main page stuff. And yeah, you can now see it's in front of the button. That's better already. So I'm just gonna paste some more classes. I don't want to go into detail for everyone, but now we get this white box with a background, a little border, a little shadow, padding, etc. added, so it looks more nice. Let's also go to this div here and maybe add some margin below and on the top. Yeah, so it's not directly on the button. Okay, so we can also display something useful in here. So let's put an H3, and we have this heading section already. So let's do that. And also for this part, I've prepared some styles. So let me copy that quickly. And voila, it's a little bit more bold. Next thing is we want to, the open part, this is currently looking like nothing. We want it to look like a basic input, like the others behave here. So we have to give it some styles. So put here, and I have prepared some classes for the button itself and also for the text. And yeah, these just add this border if you click on it, a general border also, and some padding, sizes, etc. So it looks like an input. It's also very wide, so maybe let's fix the width of this stuff. So we say on the top thing max width XS, and yeah, this looks good. So this label is already here. My linter is providing an error message, and we must provide a say which the label stands for. So we have the 4 attributes that points to another element. So we screen reader stuff and etc. users know for which element the label is for. So let's maybe generate a ID for the popover. So we have, let's also do a name first, so we can decide what's actually the context or the name of this value we use the popup for. and let's say the pop-up name is then derived from it. So we say name pop-up. Great. So we say for, and we put an ID in here, so they are linked. Great. Another small stuff is to really make sure people know that you can click in here and not to enter value like in here, but it opens something. We can insert a small icon, and I'm gonna copy that. This is basically from Heroicons, this icon, chevron up, down, and here again are some table styles with, and this one make sure it's centered and positioned correctly, and what we get is these two arrows here on the right, so it gives the impression that it opens something up. Great. And so we have open now in here, but this is actually not useful, because we want this component to work if we load a page from an existing entry, so it maybe has already an album. We want to show the already saved album name, and so we need to provide some variables to display the selected options. So let's say I think we need to actually do two. So we have value ID, because the item should return an ID value for a foreign key column in the database, for example, and also an value for a display attribute. And let's put that in here. And that's, for example, we can then go back to our page and can say value display equals album. We actually need to pass a string, album XYZ, and then it stands in here. And we also need to pass the other ones. So name, let's say album ID, and heading select an album, and also, what did I forget? Value ID, let's say 1 for now. So this is already saying I want a number. So let's add some TypeScript magic, so we allow different types, and also for the display part. And another thing we add to this basic layout for now is that we want to actually also render an input here, input of type hidden, and give the name we pass here and also value. This is necessary because, as we know in Svelte, we use forms and we use a name, and in the Server.ts, for example, we can then grab the form data, and if we give also an input with a label into this component, we can grab the data from the pop-up in the server code. So this is the basic layout for now. So let's first remove the default values, because this is a new track site, so we don't want any defaults here, and then look into how we can load the data actually from the server. So let's go to our page, and here we don't want that, and also in our combo box we also should default them with nothing. So we now get an empty one. actually, yeah, we get the problem now that it takes undefined as a text. So let's go back here and say an empty string if it's not filled. Great. So I created a small function that fetches the data. In my case, I use SQLite and I have a query and just execute it and return the data. I have a video on how to use SQLite with SvelteKit. You can watch that. But actually can use any data source you want. But what we're gonna need from that is we create a new API route for LOV, so it can fetch data from our loader function. So let's create a new folder. I call it LOV. We get list of values and a new subfolder. So we say albums because this is for our albums, LOV. And in here we do a plus server.js. And in this file, we want a get route. So we export const get. And what we do here is we need that, get the URL, and we satisfying request handler. Request handler. Great. And we also want to pass a search term in the future, so we can actually search our LOV. So we get the parameter from the URL. And actually it says something wrong here. Satisfies. Not from Semver. Satisfies. Request handler. Okay. I think it fixed itself if we return in the end. So let's fetch our data. Rows equals get LOV albums. Pass the search term. And what we also want to do, we don't want to directly pass it back like this. No, again, from wrong import, SvelteKit, and return. So we don't want to do that. We actually put another layer. And for that I've created a small type. Or I haven't actually created it yet. So let's create it, types.ts. But I'm gonna copy it. And what this type does, it just doesn't only output the data, but also a column info that consists of display. For each value or each column from our database query, we return the display value, the accessor to the JSON value, and also a row. So we have to define an ID that's returned for the database, but also display value. Or we can also display additional columns only for finding the right value for the user. So for example, here in our albums query, I have the album ID as ID, title as display value, and also additional artists that's only shown. So let's save that file and now import the type. And so we first return our rows. That's just our data is the rows value. And we also have the columns. And here we do display only ID. And it's also only ID. The next one is a title. And this is our display attribute. And we also do the artist. And that's the only visible attribute, so it doesn't have a specific role. And we return this in the end. So we now need to implement it in our component. So let's go in there and let's add actually new parameters. So first off, we want to make this component to work for all kinds of data types, so not only for albums. So we just gonna export the data, an API endpoint here. Let's don't default that. And so we can pass any endpoint we want. And we also import a loading state. So we know if we fetch the data, if we're waiting to do it, or if there's an error. And also our data, if it's fetched. And with that, we're gonna make a fetch data function. I'm just gonna copy it over and go through it. So we're gonna fetch from the API endpoint we defined, gonna pass a search term in the future. Currently we haven't implemented a search, so we do that in the future. And then we check if the response is okay. If so, we're gonna get the JSON from it. If not, we can throw an error. If it is valid JSON, we can log it first and also set our data variable here and set our loading state. And if there was an error, we're gonna set the state to error. Great. So when do we want to initially fetch? We could do it if the component mounts, but I think it's a little bit more efficient to only do it if we hover over the popover button. So we say on the button, on mouse enter, handle hover. So I now have implemented this. So what we need to do next is go back to our page and say here API endpoint equals to API. What did I put it? API LOV albums. And now we can see if this works. So I'm gonna hover over it, and what we can see here in the console is we get our column definition and our data results. Great. Still we need to show it actually. So let's go back, and now I'm gonna add something here in the section where we currently in the popover panel where we currently only show the heading. Let's add a div, and in there I have an if statement, and we check the loading states. If it's loading, just say loading. If there's an error, do a red text with the error message. And in here we can then display the results. So I'm gonna copy a table from here, and what this table does is, so we have a normal table, we have a header, and we loop in the header row through each of our defined columns. So the columns are again this here. So we have each column property here, and we loop over the display name and display that. So each data columns, and do a table header with the display value. And in the body, we loop over each data entry. So basically over this array here. So we get all the data, and do a table row for each, and in each row we again loop over all the columns, and in there we don't display the display value, but we get the accessor, so the JSON attribute. For example, here we get title or artist ID, and we display the value from there. Great. And so let's first comment out this section. It doesn't work in there. And we can see if it works. So I'm back here, click album, and what we do is we get this beautiful table, and yeah, we can then in this table select our wanted value. So yeah, currently I can't click on anything. That's alright. We need to actually go back here and say on the table row, add this back. I have a click handler and I say handle selection. That's a function I need to create. We get the item and also we pass a close function. The close function we can get from the popover panel. So we say let close, and when we select a value we want to close the whole popover. So handle selection is the next function, and this is here. I'm just gonna copy it. Handle selection, we get our item also typed, and the close function, and then we're gonna extract the ID column and display column from the columns definition, and if we found it, then we get the value of the ID and the value for the display value of the current selected value, set it to our internal value variables, and in the end close the popover. So I'm gonna save that, and I'm gonna back here, and if I'm gonna select big ones here, first it gets closed and we get the value here. Should also, if we look in the dev tools, you have here this value 5 for the album, and if I get that first one, we also, the hidden input basically represents now the selected value. Great. So now we still need to make this search work, because we actually don't show all the albums. There are many more, but the user should search for more. So let's do that. So to do our little search, we can add a search bar or a search input first, so below the heading and in front of the table. We can just add an input and can do type equals search, so we can get the clear search thing from the browser, and also add some classes and a placeholder. And yeah, we have the search now. I haven't actually started the server yet. And now we get the search, but as you know, I have to click in here. I can't stop typing, and that's not very helpful. So let's go to our panel here, and we can add or activate the focus attribute here, and it traps focus and moves it inside this panel, and this is our first input, so this gets focused. So I'm directly in the search bar. Great. So we can then do on key up. So after we typed, we can create a function called handle search. So the handle search function is pretty straightforward. So let's go here, and we pass the event we get from the input, and then we do a little debounce. So we don't want to search directly while we're typing. We wait 300 milliseconds when the last type was done and then do the request. And we do that with a small timer. And if we come in the function, we clear the previous timer if it was still not executed yet, and create a new one, and get the value that's typed into the search input, and put it into this variable search term, and then we call again fetch data. Fetch data. Here we need to then pass the search term to actually represent the thing we enter there. So let's go back and maybe search for U2, and we get all the albums from U2. One thing that's has to do with the search input type here, if we click this X, it doesn't actually refresh, or it doesn't trigger the key up event. So we need to add another event, and that's actually on search. Also do handle search, but the thing is, I don't know why, but TypeScript says this doesn't exist on input, and my solution for this is to do a little hacky trick. So I'm gonna create a small function, not type check, with any as a parameter, and then I go to the search. Where is it? Here. And in this input, let me quickly check. Yeah, we need to pass this like this. So we call it on this thingy, and because it does return any, it treats the whole input as any. So we lose some of the type help, so that's bad, but I didn't find a better solution for this problem. And if we go back now, we can again type U2, and if you click this X, again the default thing is back. So let's maybe find an album, let there be rock, and test our input. So test track, test 1, 2, 3, some milliseconds, press create, and check that it was created. Yeah, this is the thing we created. So great. So to end this off, I just want to show you how flexible this component is. So I added another one of our components here, and for genres, and I created another API endpoint for the genres. So here we have another database function that gets me all the genres, and on this column section I only display 2 values this time. So let's go ahead and check this out. So we have our album, where we can search for albums, and we have our genres, where we can also search, and we have basically separate inputs we can also use in our form submit. So here it is, value 16, and here is the other one with 2, 3, 3. So yeah, that's it for my little tutorial on how to do a pop-up LOV, select list, combo box, however you want to name it. I hope you enjoy it. If you have some feedback, make sure to put it in the comments. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.